you believe in both science and faith? Can you believe in both science and faith? For a lot of people, that question brings up some tension within them. There's this challenge internally of wrestling that happens. It feels like you've got to pick a side of this battle between faith and science and this duking it out fight and who's going to win. Maybe you felt that tension before. Maybe you felt that as you were sitting in a science class. You were sitting there in a science class and you wrestled with that tension of how do I believe what I'm being taught and how do I believe what I'm being taught at church? Maybe as a parent or a grandparent, you wrestled with that, with a child or a grandchild who is processing through what they were being taught at school and trying to reconcile those things that they're being taught with what the Bible teaches. Or maybe you've wrestled with the tension of this question, can you believe in both faith and science? Because someone has told you that you can't believe in God because science has disproven him. But here's the thing. What if the battle between science and faith is a myth? What if the battle between science and faith is a myth? What if science and faith don't actually cancel each other out? But what if they work together to reveal something incredible? That's what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks as we launch this series called The Problem of God. We're going to be tackling some of the toughest questions about faith, about Christianity, about the existence of God. And they're questions that can make a lot of people pause. Questions that can make people even walk away from their belief and their faith in Christianity entirely. These are big questions, and these big questions deserve more than just a quick, shallow response. If you've ever wrestled with doubts, or maybe you know somebody that's wrestled with doubts, this is a great series for you, for them, because think about it like this. Faith isn't about avoiding the tough questions. It's about stepping into them. Let me say it again. Faith isn't about avoiding the tough questions. It's about stepping into them. When my kids were a little younger, when they asked the question, Dad, why is the sky blue? Or Dad, why do planes, how do they fly? I could have easily responded with, don't ask that kind of a question. But I didn't. Why? Why don't we squash their curiosity to questions like that? Because their questions, they don't threaten the truth. Their questions, they help them discover it. Help them discover it. And God invites you and I to do the very same thing. See, God's not afraid of your questions. He's not afraid of any doubts that you have. In fact, wrestling with those doubts, wrestling with the questions that you've got, they can actually deepen your faith in Jesus. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to explore one big problem each week. Questions that people have about God, about Christianity. But instead of avoiding the questions, we're going to tackle them. We're going to tackle them head on. And together, we're going to see that what many people see as problems are actually opportunities. They're opportunities for us to grow in our faith, opportunities for us to grow in our relationship with Jesus. And so today we're starting with one of the most common barriers for people that they face, and it's the relationship between faith and science. So I want to talk with you for a few minutes today about this idea of beyond the microscope. Beyond the microscope, the spot where science and faith meet. Where science and faith meet. And for many people, science, it feels like it's in direct opposition to Christianity. It feels like it's directly opposing Christianity. And maybe you've heard it said, maybe you've heard somebody tell you this, that you can't believe science and you can't believe God at the same time. But is that really true? And if it's not, how do we explain it? And so that's what we're diving into today. That's what we're going to take a look at today. And here's the big idea that I want you to see today, is that faith and science don't contradict each other, they complement each other. Faith and science don't contradict each other, they complement each other. Science shows us how, faith shows us why. Science shows us how, faith shows us why. And so we're going to turn to Psalm chapter 19 for the foundation of our passage today. And it says this in Psalm 19, verse 1. It says, the heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display his craftsmanship. Day after day they continue to speak. Night after night they make him known. They speak without a sound or a word. Their voice is never heard. Yet their message has gone throughout the earth, and their words to all the world. God has made a home in the heavens for the sun. David, who's the author of this psalm, he reminds us that the earth, the heavens, they declare God's glory. The stars, the sky, the beauty that's in our natural world, all of it points to a creator. It points to a creator. And science, it can help us understand the how behind these things. Science can help us understand the how behind the wonders of the natural world that we live in. But it takes faith for us to be able to understand the why. Faith helps us understand the why. See, science isn't the enemy of faith. Science is not the enemy of faith. Let me address this myth that's become popular in the culture that we live in. This idea that science and faith are enemies. One of the main reasons that this myth exists is because we tend to view the world in either-or terms. Either you believe in science or you believe in God. Either you believe in science or you're a person of faith. But life is rarely that cut and dry. Life is rarely that simple. Think about this classic debate, right? You're either a cat person or you're a dog person. It's a classic debate. Now, it's not a debate in my house. I am a neither person. All right? There is no cat, no dog. I'm a neither person. So there's not a debate. But for a lot of people, there's a debate. Are you either a cat person or a dog person? Right? There's this debate that takes place, this debate that happens, but it's not really an either or. It's kind of a both and. Like, you have the ability to like cats and dogs. Now, some may not, but you can. Now, you might get chastised by your friend who's a dog person and thinks that cats are evil. Cats and dogs, they can't coexist, rarely can coexist. But it's not an either-or thing, and the same is true with science and faith. The same is true. They can coexist. They can work together. They're not opposites. They're actually different perspectives of the same truth. The truth is, science, it actually rests on faith in some very key areas. Scientists, they have faith that the world operates, that the universe operates in a consistent manner. They have faith that there are going to be consistent, repeated patterns. They have faith that the laws of physics that we're looking at, that we're feeling today, they have faith that they're going to be there tomorrow. Science operates with faith. Even the process of scientific discovery requires logic, reason, and a certain level of trust and evidence. Things that can't always be seen are believed to be true. Here's an example. Science can tell you how a seed grows to one day be a tree. Science can tell you about the process of photosynthesis and how seeds grow into trees and all of these things. Science, it can tell you the role of the nutrients that are there in the soil that helps the seed grow and flourish and become this wonderful big tree. But science can't teach you, it can't tell you the why you feel a sense of awe when you sit under the shade of that tree. Science can't explain that to you. It can tell you how the tree got there, roughly how long it's been there, how the seed nourished and flourished, but it can't tell you the sense of awe that you feel. And Albert Einstein, he acknowledged the mystery of the universe when he said this. He said, "Science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind." What Einstein recognized is that science and faith, they both have roles. They both have roles in our lives. Science, it answers the question of how things work. And faith, it gives us the framework for meaning, gives us the framework for purpose in our lives. And so if science isn't the enemy of faith, then we need to ask, what does science tell us about God? If it's not the enemy of faith, what does science teach us? What does it tell us about God? So let's explore how the design of the universe, it points to a creator. The universe actually points to a creator. When we look at the universe, what do we see? We see order. We see design. We see precision. We see intentionality. Imagine with me for a moment. You're walking through a forest. And as you walk through the forest, you happen to see there on the ground a beautiful new iPhone 16 Pro Max. Now, if you're an Apple person, you love that. If you're an Android person, you hate that I just brought Apple into this. And that's okay. I'm an Apple person, so there you go. But you see this beautiful new iPhone just sitting there on the floor of the forest. You're not going to assume that it just appeared there, are you? You're going to assume that iPhone 16 Pro Max that's sitting there on the floor of the forest, somebody designed it, somebody brought it there. You're not going to assume that it just appeared out of nothing. Now think about the universe. It is infinitely more complex than any iPhone 16 Pro Max. And yet some people believe that it happened, the universe, by accident. The fine-tuning, the intricate decision details of the universe, they actually point to intelligent design. Scientists, they've discovered that the conditions for life, they're incredibly precise. I mean, just think about the laws of physics, how important they are. Think about the constants of nature. Think about the placement of the earth and the solar system. These things are so exact that the chances of them happening by random are astronomically small. Fred Hoyle, who's an astrophysicist who didn't believe in Jesus, he put it this way. He said, the chance that higher life forms have emerged throughout evolutionary processes is comparable with the chance that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard might assemble a Boeing 747. Highly unlikely. Possible? Sure. But highly unlikely. And Job chapter 38, God reminds Job of his role as the creator. When he says, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you understand. He says, who marked off the dimensions? Surely, he says, you know. The universe is too ordered, too purposeful to be a result, in my opinion, of random chance. But while science can point us to the how, it can't really answer the bigger question, why? And that's where faith steps in. Science asks how, faith answers why. Science asks how, faith answers why. Think about baking a cake with me for a moment. Now, if you've been around Grace Point long enough, you know how much I have a fascination with sugar. Cake sounds really good. Cake and ice cream, we're talking, all right? My body doesn't like it, but my taste buds do. But think about a cake with me for a moment, all right? Science can explain the chemical reaction of taking the batter and how the ingredients interact together and this batter becomes a cake, how it rises to form a cake. Science can explain those chemical reactions that take place in your oven as that cake is baking, but science can't tell you why the cake was made. Only the baker can. Only the baker can tell you that that cake was made for somebody's retirement party. Only the baker's going to be able to tell you that that cake was made as a graduation gift for somebody who loves cakes. Science can't do that. It can tell you all the reactions that take place. It can tell you how that stuff rises, but it can't tell you the why behind it. And the same is true for the universe. The same is true for the universe. Science can tell us how the universe works, but it can't tell us why it exists, can't tell us why we're here. Science is a tool. It is a tool to understand the natural world, but it's limited. It can explain the mechanics of life, but it can't explain the meaning of life. In Proverbs chapter 25:2, it says, "It is God's privilege to conceal things and the king's privilege to discover them." You see, the limits of science, they highlight our need for faith. The limits of science highlight our need for faith because science, it's got boundaries. Science, it operates in the realm of measurable. It operates in the realm of what we can observe. But the most important questions of life are neither. Questions like, why do we exist? Questions like, what happens after we die? Questions like, what's the purpose of life? These are questions that science can't answer for us. It doesn't have the ability to act. In fact, to answer these questions, to answer them, it's like trying to use a microscope to study the stars. It's the wrong tool for the job. C.S. Lewis, he said it beautifully. He said, if the whole universe has no meaning, we should never have found out that it has no meaning. Just as if there were no light in the universe, and therefore no creatures with eyes, we should never know it was dark. The fact that we ask these questions, it actually points us to something beyond the physical world. That we ask the questions of why do we exist? What happens after we die? What's our purpose? Faith gives meaning to the scientific discoveries. When science and faith, when they work together, something amazing happens. Something incredible. Science, it shows us the beauty, it shows us the complexity of God's creation. And faith, it gives us the discoveries of the meanings. For example, science tells us the earth is uniquely positioned to support life. Faith tells us that God designed it in a way that he wanted a relationship with us. Science explains how the human brain processes empathy. But faith tells us that we were made in the image of a compassionate God. Science, it studies the vastness of the universe. But faith reminds us of a God who created the galaxies, that he knows the numbers of hairs on our head. In Romans 11:33, it captures this tension and this beauty. It says, "Oh, how great are God's riches and wisdom and knowledge. How impossible it is for us to understand his decisions and his ways." You see, science and faith, they don't diminish the mystery of God. They magnify it. Science and faith don't diminish the mystery. They magnify the mystery. And so if science shows us how, and faith shows us why, where does Jesus fit in the picture? You see, Jesus brings it all together. Jesus brings it all together. When we consider the relationship between faith and science, it's easy for us to compartmentalize scientific facts here and faith about feelings here. Keep them separate. But Jesus, he defines those categories. Scientific facts, faith, and he bridges the two. Jesus is the bridge between the spiritual and the scientific. Jesus is the bridge between what we can measure and what we can only experience. And it says in John chapter 1, verse 1, that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, and through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. That word in the Greek is the word logos. That word logos, it means reason, it means logic, it means divine. Jesus is the logos. Jesus is the reason. He is the divine logic behind creation. He's not just the creator. He's the purpose behind everything that exists. Science and faith both find their ultimate answer in Jesus. Everything that we see in the natural world was made through him. The laws of physics, the beauty of the stars, the complexity of our DNA, all of it. Jesus was the architect. And in Colossians chapter 1, it says, "For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together." Everything. Science, faith, the universe, all of it points us back to Jesus. He's the creator. He's the sustainer. He's the one who gives purpose to all of it. And by bringing science and faith, when we bring them together, Jesus paints a picture of a universe that isn't random. He paints a picture of a universe that isn't meaningless. He paints a picture of a universe that's created by a loving God. And he shows us that his ultimate goal isn't just to understand creation, but to worship the Creator. And so what if science actually points humanity to God instead of disproving his existence? Romans chapter 1, verse 20. "For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made." Paul says this. He says, creation by itself is evidence. It's evidence of God. And when we study the natural world, when we use science to study the natural world, we see the fingerprints of God everywhere. All over the place. The complexity, the order, the beauty, all of it points to a creator. And the Bible makes it clear that science is not the enemy of faith. It's actually one of the ways that we can explore God's creation. It's one of the ways that we can get to know God better. Think about this. Through the sky, the stars, the trees in the forest, even the tiniest, smallest little microorganism that's within our body, all of it is God reaching out to us. And it's if God was saying to us, look at all of it. Look at the creation, the biggest of things, the galaxies in the sky, the microorganisms. Look at them. I created them. I made it for you. I want to know you. I want a personal relationship with you. I'm here. Verse 21 of Romans 1 says that it's not about the lack of evidence, but it's the suppression of it. Paul says, "For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened." Mark Clark, he writes this in The Problem of God. He says, "The problem isn't that the evidence isn't there. It's that we overlook the signposts because we would rather believe in something else." It's not that the evidence isn't there. It's that we overlook the signposts because we would rather believe in something different. So what do we do with all of this? How do we take all of this information? What do we do with it? How do we live out this truth in a world that's pitting science and faith against each other? How do we respond to something like this? We ask honest questions. We ask honest questions. Faith is not afraid of your questions. God can handle the doubts that you wrestle with. He can answer the questions that you ask. If you're wrestling with the tension between faith, the tension with science, ask questions. Seek answers. God can handle it. He has the ability to handle the questions, the biggest of them, the doubts that you've got. One of the most freeing truths about faith is that it doesn't require blind acceptance. Throughout the Bible, you look at stories in the Bible, there are people in the Bible who doubted God. Job wrestled with God's justice. David, throughout the Psalms, we see David wrestling and doubting God. Thomas, one of the guys who walked with Jesus, doubted the resurrection of Jesus. God's able to handle your doubts, your questions, your concerns, your fears. Ask honest questions. God doesn't rebuke honest seekers. He actually invites them. And we see that in Jeremiah 29:13, where it promises that if you seek me and find me, you seek me with all your heart. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. If you're struggling to reconcile faith and science, ask those hard questions. Ask the hard questions. Surround yourself with mentors. Find a couple pastors who can guide you. Faith is not about ignoring the facts. It's about seeking the ultimate truth, which is Jesus. And in his book, The Problem of God, Mark Clark writes these words. He says, doubt isn't the enemy of faith. It's often the doorway to a stronger belief. I love that. Doubt isn't the enemy of faith. It's often the doorway to stronger faith. What do? We ask honest questions, and we worship through wonder. We worship the Creator through wonder. When you see the beauty of creation, when you look outside, you look at the stars in the sky at night, you see the beauty of the fall leaves, the flowers that are blooming in the spring, you look at it and let it point you to the Creator. Let it point you to worship Him. Look at the stars. Feel the heartbeat of your chest and worship. Worship the God who made all of it. Science, it reveals the details of God's handiwork. Did you know that the human body has about 37.2 trillion cells, all working together in harmony? We can barely get 3 people to work together in harmony, let alone 37.2 trillion cells. Or think about the earth, how it's perfectly positioned in our solar system. It's not too close to the sun to where we burn, and it's not too far away to where we freeze. It's perfectly positioned in a way that makes life possible. Psalm 8:3 says, when I look at the night sky and see the work of your fingers, the moon, the stars you set in place, what are mere mortals that you should think about them? Human beings that you should care for them. When we stop to marvel at the beauty, at the complexity of the world around us, it leads us to worship. You see, science, it doesn't shrink our view of God. It expands it. It doesn't shrink our view, it expands it. What do we do with this? How do we take this and walk out of here? Use science to share your faith. Use science to share your faith. When someone says, I believe in science. Great, me too. Me too. See, too often as Christians, we hear that somebody believes in science and we back away. We get a little uncomfortable, a little defensive. But what if we saw it as an opportunity? What if we saw it as an opportunity? Science isn't an enemy. It's a tool. It's a tool that can reveal the fingerprints of God. Instead of seeing science as a threat, what if we used it as a bridge for our conversations about faith? Because God's truth is big enough to handle the biggest questions, the biggest discoveries of science. Science, it takes us to the very edge of understanding, but faith is what gives us the courage to take the leap into meaning. As followers of Jesus, we don't have to fear science. Instead, we can embrace the one who created it all. We can embrace the ways that God reveals himself to you and to I. Science didn't disprove God. It confirmed what he had already revealed. Science doesn't disprove God. It confirms what he has already revealed. Would you pray with me? God, we thank you. We thank you that you're a God of truth. God, that you're not afraid of our questions. We can bring our doubts to you. And God, you invite us to seek you, to explore your creation, God, to grow in our understanding of you. God, we pray for boldness to be able to ask the hard questions. God, give us the courage to have the conversations. And God, give us the wisdom to be able to discern the truth. As we keep praying this morning, we talked about the universe. We talked about how the world reflects the glory of God, the Creator. But beyond the beauty of the stars, the vastness of the skies, the intricacies of our world, God designed it for you. He designed it with purpose, with love. He designed it to be in a relationship with you. And so today, whether you're watching online, whether you're here with us in person, if you've been searching for meaning, for answers, for hope, know that you can find that in Jesus. He's the one who holds all things together, including your life. And he desires a personal relationship with you. And so if you're ready to say yes to a relationship with Jesus, say yes to finding some meaning, finding some answers, yes to hope. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to lift your hand with heads bowed and eyes closed. And what we'll do is we'll repeat a prayer together. Everybody in here will repeat it line by line. We don't want to single you out. We don't want to embarrass you. But if that's you today, ready to say yes to Jesus, yes to a relationship, a personal relationship with him, the creator of the universe wants to have a personal relationship with you. If that's you today, ready to enter into a relationship with him, with heads bowed and eyes closed, would you just lift your hand on the count of 3? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Church, would you pray this prayer with me? Say, Jesus, I believe that I believe that you're the creator. I believe that you're the Savior of my life. Today, Jesus, I admit I've tried to do it on my own. But today I surrender to you. Forgive my sins. Make me new. Today, Jesus, I'm choosing to follow you. I'm choosing to trust you. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for giving me purpose. In Jesus' name, amen. Church, can we worship big and loud with those who said yes to Jesus today?